Did you know that 1 out of every 3 Latino businesses is owned by a woman? Today in the Su Socio De Negocios podcast, sponsored by BMO, we have Martha de la Torre, CEO and founder of El Clasificado. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the Su Socio De Negocios podcast. Local businesses play an invaluable role in our communities. BMO is helping business owners make real financial progress with access to funds and resources. Learn more at bmo.com. Today, we're talking with Martha de la Torre. She's the CEO and founder of El Clasificado. Martha, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Martha, for those that don't know El Clasificado, tell us a little bit about what is El Clasificado.
Well, 36 years ago, I was working at a Spanish language media company after I had left my career as a CPA. And I saw that Latinos didn't have the same sources of media to find jobs, to find rentals. And I thought they needed that, and that could be helpful. And so I had the concept of El Clasificado, something that would have helped my parents when they immigrated in the 1950s to the U.S. with no other family to help them. And so we launched El Clasificado free, like the penny saver classified ads about jobs, make it really simple because I couldn't write in Spanish. But we did have a little bit of editorial, like good housekeeping type of articles, how to get your kids in school, college, how to become a U.S. citizen, how to take care of your health, and resources for Latinos. There was really nothing like that was free at the time. And so I just thought the community needed it. And fortunately, 36 years later, they have affirmed that.
Martha, what kind of challenges did you run into at the very beginning of starting El Clasificado?
Well, it was my first venture as an entrepreneur, and I didn't really want to be the entrepreneur. I wanted to work with people who knew more than I did, but things didn't work out, so I found myself the CEO. And I probably wasn't as prepared as I would have liked. I had a business plan, and I wanted to stick to my business plan. I was a CPA. I knew how to write a business plan. What I learned, and it was a good lesson later in life, is that you have to pivot. You have to adjust. Things weren't as I thought they were with the marketing information. We didn't have the internet then. But what I did research at the time did help me in the future. Just it took longer. You have to build the bigger contingencies possibly, and you have to have backup plans. And we really stumbled the first 10 years. But after that, I think we learned to assess risk better, make some choices, diversify, but with more planning and research in advance.
Martha, the business landscape or professional landscape sometimes can be a little bit more challenging for women. I still think that gender separation, gender gap is still out there, prevalent in the business world. What kind of challenge do you think you personally had as a business owner?
As a woman business owner, to be honest with you, I don't think I had any different challenges. And I might be different than other people when they think that, but I had good mentors. My aunt was an entrepreneur. My mother was an entrepreneur. My other grandmother was principal of the school. So women as leaders was not unusual to me. And so those aren't the challenges I had. I had a little bit of challenge in the Latino community. If I wanted to take a male business owner out to lunch, sometimes they would refuse because they didn't want to be taken out by a woman. But that's really about it. And we've had a lot of women leaders, men leaders at our company. We always try to choose the best. And fortunately, I think people have adapted, although I don't know if that would be the case in Latin countries, although I see many female presidents now. So I think we're good. I think people, see women as equal leaders. It's all on their competence and how they deal with and balance their life and their work.
Challenges happen throughout your existence of a business. And we've seen our fair amount of challenges throughout the history of El Clasificado. You had recession, you had a housing crisis, and you had the ever so lovely COVID. Tell us a little bit about how do you deal with these type of challenges? How do you pivot? That's a word that you used earlier. How do you pivot the business to adjust itself to the economy the state of the economy at the time?
Well, the first 10 years were a real challenge because I still didn't think I knew what I was doing. It took us about 10 years to get the formula right. Once you get the formula right and we realized we adapted to our customers' needs, we adapted and we decided our niche customer, our bread and butter is that little tiny business on Whittier Boulevard, on Pacific Boulevard, how to keep them happy and keep them going. So anytime there was a crisis like 9/11, like the pandemic, the first thing we said is, how are we going to keep our customers alive? And then our employees had to pivot, change, retrain, do different things to help our customers stay in business. Sometimes that means giving free marketing, free products to keep them in business. And I think what always happens to us when we have to change, we have to say, what do our customers need? And just focus. Make sure we know who our customer is. That's number one. Sometimes we get big customers and major customers, but that's a small part of our business. And if one of those customers drops you, you could really get hurt. We've always learned not to depend on one customer, but to depend on many customers and the community, our audience and customers. Always stay on top of what they need, whether that's print, internet, mobile, social, video. We have to adapt. It's challenging. It gets harder and harder. And to analyze everything and how to interpret that in Spanish, talking to a business owner who might not be that computer illiterate to see that we're getting them results. That's always a challenge. But keep your eye on the customer's needs. That's my biggest advice.
Right. I think that's a great advice because I think knowing your audience, knowing your clients really sets you up for success with new products, with new trends. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes. And then sometimes, we try to follow what everyone else is doing, what the general market's doing. And then we find it's too soon. When other companies were dying in print, we weren't dying. We kept growing and growing way past that. And sometimes we thought, print is going to die. Let's focus on digital. But then we stepped back and said, you know what? Our print is still strong. As a matter of fact, now it's growing again because we're one of the only print publishing companies in Spanish language media still alive that we even launched a new product, Vivela. So once again, our advertisers needed it. Our clients need it. So we still focus on that, but we do keep an eye on the future. And the other thing that's tricky for people in the Latino Spanish language media environment is that our audiences change drastically because of the language. So that's something we've always been afraid. When are Spanish people going to stop speaking Spanish? And I thought that was going to be 20 years ago. It still hasn't happened. They're still speaking Spanish and we're still riding that successful wave of pleasing them. And sometimes it's still young people too. They like the Spanish culture and they like following media that provides them and connects them to that Latino culture.
Martha, what key decisions have you made in your time with El Clasificado that really has changed the company?
When we started as a company, I came from the corporate world. So I was used to having managers and delegating. And I probably delegated too much because I don't think I knew my product well enough. So then I started learning and doing everything. I did the invoicing, I did the distribution, I did too much. So then adjusting again. And once you got the formula right, put in processes so you could even train. We started growing by hiring interns from high school and college to work part-time, to take tasks off our hands. So I could work more on the future, on clients, on marketing. And then I think as we grow, it's the one thing we have to teach our leaders is delegate, share knowledge, cascade, everything and put it in someone else's head. They don't have to understand everything, but give everyone bits and pieces of it and train them. Training is so important, and creating processes where sometimes they don't always understand why they're doing things, but eventually they have an aha moment. And that way it's like the Model T, Ford was able to build it because one person did the wheel, one person did the screw. So that's the way I started looking at El Clasificado. Break it up in little pieces where people don't have to be, top designers to design an ad, but they can learn and they can use tools. And now with AI, it's really the ones who can think, who are critical thinkers, even if they don't have the skills, they can do things with the power of artificial intelligence.
I'm glad you brought up artificial intelligence. I want to go back to something that you said about training people, right? I think that is important. It has become almost a common denominator at the Su Socio De Negocios podcast that every person that I've spoken to, they've talked about giving their staff the tools to grow, because I think that's ultimately those are the future leaders of each company. How do you empower your employees?
Training is important. We have a budget of training hours a year that we need to fulfill. We do have, we try to have monthly company-wide meetings. At first, it was just manager meetings. And now with the power of Zoom, we thought, let's have everyone in there. Sometimes people don't understand everything you're talking about, but little by little, they'll get the ideas. They get the buzzwords. It's good for them to hear, new things going on. When TikTok was new, at least they heard of it. What's interesting now is a lot of times younger people know more than we do. They're the ones who are bringing in the ideas, the new tools, education online that is free. So that's been kind of a flip where before I had to find the courses and the conferences and set up the classes and bring trainers in. We still do that, but it's also listening to the younger people. What are you using? How do you search online? How do you decide to buy a car? Listening to them and then trying to take that information, find out what tools exist, what resources we could give our managers to say, create this process to build a campaign around, this product, but use these tools that we're hearing from our staff that they're starting to use.
To get back to AI, because I think it's not a trend. AI is something that's going to stay in the business world. What kind of advice would you give a Latino business owner as to how to apply AI in their business? How critical has it been, for instance, for Clasificado?
I use AI every hour, personal and business practically, that I have access. If I have a question, I just look it up. So I think so many people are afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs, especially skilled people. And what you need to think of is if you use artificial intelligence, let's say to design an ad, it's not as good as the one you can make because of your skills. But if you can use it to have an entry-level person get trained to do all the simple ads, all the small ads that show up on a cell phone that don't have to be perfect, delegate that. You could do more. It's the power of 20 with artificial intelligence, and you can focus on reviewing, on the hard stuff, on the critical things. And it's not just being used for writing articles, for designing ads. We're using it with Excel now. We drop information, create an Excel sheet that helps me do a compensation plan. We use it for programming. The programmers don't have to, and I used to program myself, so I know how repetitive it could be, and you have to be so perfect with every line or you screw everything up. Use AI. It's going to be a little bit more perfect than you are because it's not going to get tired. It's going to remember everything. Use it as a super you.
That's a good point. The super you, I like that. And you know what? I think we're at a point that we should embrace this type of technology. I think it enhances the productivity of an employee or of anyone really, a student, an employee. The other day, I'll be honest with you, I AI'd a recipe to cook because
oh yeah,
I was telling my wife, our biggest struggle is what to have for dinner, and I said, hey, let's use AI. And it came up with a week's worth of, because that's what I asked, give me a week's worth of recipes. And that's exactly what we did. So we should embrace AI.
I have a funny story for you. So our Viva La magazine comes out at the end of the month, and it features the following month. So February, there was one little article on St. Patrick's Day, because our editorial team remembered that I really like St. Patrick's Day. It's because my father, it's his birthday. And he's passed, so of course I want to remember him. But their idea of celebrating it was put a recipe of how to make Irish stew. And so our editorial team is from other Latin countries that don't really celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I said, people don't celebrate St. Patrick's Day by staying home cooking an Irish stew. They celebrate by going to a pub, by going drinking. And they said, well, it's too late. We can't do recipes for drinks. So I sat on AI. I created some drinks that I thought would be typical Irish. And then I said, add tequila, make it Mexican. And we came up with 3 recipes. And then I said, create the images of it because they didn't have time to create an image. And I gave it to them. And I was so proud it was published. I was on the front cover of the magazine, my little leprechaun drink.
And if you haven't had an Irish stew, they're amazing. My wife is half Irish. So every so often, she won't cook it. Actually, she gets it at a local wholesaler. And it's fantastic.
But you have to have the drink, St. Patty's margarita to go with it.
All right. Well, I don't know about that. I haven't had it, but the stew was fantastic. All right, Martha, let me get back on track here away from the food subject because I am hungry. But let's talk about women in business again, because I think that's what we're here for. What kind of advice would you share based on your experience as a CEO to a Latino entrepreneur, a woman Latino entrepreneur? What kind of advice would you give her?
Well, the first thing I would say is try to find what people need in the near future. What is there a shortage of? Because that always makes it easier for you to enter the market. When we entered as El Clasificado, print classifieds, we were the only classified paper in town. So it was really easy to grow. When we launched elclasificado.com, we were the only ones doing classifieds in Spanish. Now it's really hard. We're competing with Facebook, Indeed, everybody. But at least, we had a good run to make ourselves strong and to still be one of the strongest classified sites in the US. So when you start something, unless you have a big marketing budget and want to compete, start with something, first of all, that you know. And if you want to have children, that's going to be a challenge. Maybe something that keeps you close to home is good, where you work with other people. I have to go to the office. I'm the kind of person that wants to go to the office. And it would have been really difficult had I had children. I wanted them. I would have traded it now, but it didn't happen. But that's what I would suggest because for women, having children, it's a real challenge, especially in Los Angeles when you have a lot of traffic. But find something that is needed. You don't want to be in a job that's going to disappear. And there's a lot of jobs that are disappearing. Be on top of that. Don't start something that is not going to be needed in 10 years unless you only want to work for 10 years.
Martha, how would you, in the professional years that you've accrued, and your time as a CEO and as a CPA, how do you measure success?
Well, that's funny because I think once we finally realized we're not going to go bankrupt, we're going to survive, we're cash flowing. I was just so happy that I didn't have to worry about going out of business anymore. Then we had employees who were going to college and coming back. And I thought, we have to be bigger if they're going to stay with us. So I set a goal of 10 million. And then we met that goal. And I go, oh no, now we have to be bigger. So I'm probably more of a lifestyle entrepreneur. I was never one of those people that wanted to be a multi-million-dollar person because I thought that's a lot of work. I didn't want to do that. I love family. And, but at our peak, we became a 22, plus $1 million company. I'm really proud of that. Since the pandemic, a lot of that has washed away. A lot of our clients are no longer in business, but we adjusted and we have to realize that we're shrinking as a company. Will we ever grow to that size again? I'm not sure. Maybe not under my watch, but I hope that we're building a company. I will feel very successful if our company survives when I retire and that I leave a strong, financially sound company that the next generation can take to whatever level they have dreams to reach.
Martha, I think mistakes are part of business. You have to make mistakes, and out of those mistakes, the lesson really is that you've learned from that mistake. What mistakes do you think you've learned over your time that have led to good decisions later on?
Well, I don't know if it's led to good decisions, but finally, when I fixed it, I realized that was a good decision. I think 2 of my biggest weaknesses are holding on to a product too long, wishing it turns around and works. I'm getting better at that. And then sometimes holding on to a staff person that I keep wanting to help, but makes other people unhappy at work. And I realize that sometimes I have to look at the whole of a company, that sometimes you just have to separate yourself from someone that brings negativity to the company. And over the years, what I've learned is attitude is number one. Sometimes people feel your skills are number one. Skills are so important. A lot of skills can be learned, trained, and you can do a lot without having geniuses everywhere. But attitude is just golden. And we spend so much time at work. It's so nice to come to work when people are smiling and happy. And we had a compliment a few weeks ago. A reporter from the LA Times was here interviewing us. And he told our marketing manager that this is the first time in a long time he walked into a business that everybody was happy doing what they're doing. And that was the biggest compliment. And we've been told that before, that when people come to El Clasificado, it looks like people are happy, like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. I love that, because you don't want to go somewhere that is not a happy place.
Martha, what do you attribute that mentality or that spirit from an El Clasificado employee?
I hope that we're role models and mentors, that we push people to work harder and we push people to do more with less, especially the last few years that has been financially challenged. But we're here. We roll up our sleeves with everyone when we have to, and we listen, and we're sympathetic and we're empathetic. And I think Joe and I have a lot of empathy, where I see a lot of people who don't. You know, everything's cut and dry. Everything's dollars and cents. Everything's about them and, driving their Mercedes or whatnot. And I think Joe and I over the years have always been willing to sacrifice, many things for the better good of the whole company. And I hope that sense of empathy and caring and curiosity about each other as a person stimulates our office and our staff to be happier than not when they come to work.
I think that is true. Martha, we, as a business owner, or a person in general, to be honest, we would love to have a crystal ball and see the future.
I felt I used to have that. Because of the English market. Everything that was good in the English market, I go, if it's happening there, it's going to happen to us. But then things changed.
Things have changed. We live in a globalized economy. Everything is so networked together. And
Latinos jump on technology, cell phones. They were,
right. So
they over-index on Facebook, on cell phones, on TikTok.
It's different. Martha, I think we would all love to have a crystal ball and see the future. But what keeps you up at night? What are your concerns in the business?
My concerns are about making sure we have the right people in the right place to take El Clasificado to another level when Joe and I are ready to retire. And that's what we're focused on, training the leadership that we have. And a lot of them are emerging, surpassing my expectations. And we do have some gaps. And we just have to be really good about putting together great talent. We've done it at so many parts of the journey of El Clasificado in the past. I'm so proud of many milestones that we've achieved, but we're heading to a very complex milestone. We're more digital than print. We surpassed that a few years ago, and we have to make sure we have the right people to navigate that journey to continued success. Now, I do want to be clear. We're not planning to retire anytime soon. Our company keeps us young, and we want to keep growing with it. And fortunately, we have time to keep learning and teaching and training and nurturing. We're looking forward to the next chapter with our team.
Martha, tell me about the transition between print and digital. How difficult was that for a business such as yours and the size of the business to really make that shift to digital?
It wasn't hard because it was hard for our audience and our advertisers, but it wasn't hard for us. We were fortunate that I had mentors who were pushing me to go to conferences, and I was going to conferences in Europe, and I saw what was already happening there. I saw that already print was dying, and these were classified papers just like us, and what they were doing for digital and what they were doing for mobile. So I actually had a crystal ball. So we would come back, take this knowledge, and prepare for it. We had a website, but people weren't using it. But we were building that website, and then when the switch went from desktop to mobile. Latinos over-index on mobile. They were already on mobile. Our traffic just shot up because we were so good for mobile. We were ready for that. And so we've had an incredible website that was making a lot of money from self-serve revenues, from affiliate revenues. But the funny thing is a lot of our clients still did not want to go to digital. They still wanted just to print. They didn't think they needed an online presence, but the pandemic changed that. And we had a goal of giving away 1,000 websites for free, and with the goal of 20% of those customers, if they would eventually pay us, that was success, and we exceeded that goal. And now a lot of clients, we've educated them. And that's another thing we do with Su Socio De Negocios. We have workshops to educate them on why an online presence is important, why Google My Business is important, why having a website, even if it's just one page, is important. So they get found because they have to get found on a little phone. When people are on the go, they don't always have the print. They don't have a desktop. So I think we've been very good at that and educating our clients. So for us, I would say, yes, it was years of investment and years of pulling teeth, getting people convinced. But I see our colleagues, many who no longer exist because they did not make the transition. They did not invest in the digital, in the mobile, even when the ROI was slim. But we always had an eye on the future, and we kept going in that direction. But we have both now. We still have print. Our print has shrunk, but what we have is very strong, and we're growing it again. And the digital we have is fortunately growing again after the pandemic. People are coming back. People are doing business. I think they're more optimistic in the next few years, even though things are a little shaky right now with the immigration issues. But we had a very successful quinceañera event this past weekend. We were worried nobody was going to come, but we had over 1,000 attendees and very serious girls who are going to have a quinceañera. So we're very optimistic based on those trends.
The party's on.
The party's on.
Martha, what advice or rather, how do you feel about education or being prepared as a Latino business owner? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm big on education, but then it can be very expensive. And we work with a lot of top-notch people at El Clasificado who I don't believe finished their college degree. And they've studied online. They're self-taught. They're motivated. There's so much you can do. You could program without a college degree. Education is important when you should know how to write. You should know how to think. If you're a good student, you'll get that through high school. If you're not, then it's good to go to college and do some teamwork and team classes and learn to work with people. That's really important. It all depends on the field you're going to go into. If you're going to be a doctor, you have to go to school. If you're going to be a technician, you have to go to school. There's some things you don't have to go to school. You just have to start doing. So education, is it formal education? Is it informal education? Education is so important. It's the only way that you're going to get ahead. It's just a matter of... it doesn't have to be formal.
Martha, before we end the podcast, and I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. What message would you give the next generation of Latina entrepreneurs? What is it that you'd want to share with them?
Well, if you're a Latina entrepreneur serving the Latino market, then it's about understanding your community and which segment of that community. There are many different kinds of Latinos, different cultures. People in California are different than people in Florida. You need to understand that market. It's not a homogeneous market if you're going to serve that market. And if you're just an entrepreneur and you happen to be Latina, then it's about understanding all your audience. You want more than just Latinos coming to your shop. It's once again, it's about who's your customer, who do you want to serve, and taking care of that customer and grow with that customer and help that customer grow, help that customer get more customers.
Customer centric?
Customer centric.
I love that. Martha, once again, thank you so much for joining us on the Su Socio De Negocios podcast, sponsored by BMO. And thank you for watching the podcast. We'll be back with more podcasts throughout the season, so stay tuned.